And so from there, I was able to move on to bigger and better things. I was able to then go to Sister Kinney Rehab, which is where I started actually doing real physical therapy. And so that started out with just simply sitting up in bed. Because at that point, I'd been laying down for almost 2 months. And so for me to sit up, my blood pressure would just drop. Everything would go down to my feet. I had no muscles flexing in my legs to pump the blood back up to my heart. And the first time, I think I made it 21 seconds and almost passed out. They had to lay me down, lift my feet up, let the blood rush back to my head. And then we just kept working from there. It's just like the ice cube and breathing. Started off very small, very simple, and eventually was able to sit up longer, go a little bit longer, and eventually I made it into a wheelchair. But in this process, they fit me for what's called a TLSO. And a TLSO is something nobody ever wants. It's basically a huge turtle shell that went from my hips up to my neck, and it was a big plastic thing that was Velcroed on both sides, really tight, fit to my body perfectly. In fact, a little too perfectly, because it was so tight that it would be hard to eat, because when my stomach would start to expand with food in it, I'd only get maybe a quarter of a meal in, and I'd have to stop because I'd be so uncomfortable. But so they put me in this thing, and they told me I had to wear it for 3 months because of the damage that I had in my back from all the broken vertebrae. They needed this thing on so that everything would heal properly. And I hated it. So I ended up spending as much time in bed as I possibly could, because anytime I was sitting up above 30 degrees, I had to have this brace on. But if I was in that below 30 degrees, I could have the brace off. So you could imagine as much time as I could get without having this thing on, that's what I wanted, even though I needed to be up and I needed to be moving around. So got the sitting up down, got into a wheelchair, and from there the real physical therapy started. And that's when I started to actually somewhat be able to have some fun with it. The first thing that we ended up doing was sitting there on the edge of a mat, just a bench about the same height as my wheelchair, and just trying to sit up and balance myself. And so at first it was just trying to sit up and hold myself with my hands, and then eventually trying to take one hand off, and eventually 2 hands. And the problem that I was having with sitting up is that I'm paralyzed from the chest down. I don't have any abs. I don't really have any lower back. I don't have any of that to support myself to sit up. So I'm trying to do it with no muscles to allow me to do that. It was a very strange process. But it reminded me of something I knew in my past, which was rollerblading. In rollerblading, you jump onto a handrail. Say you want to do a 50-foot long handrail. You focus on the end of that rail. You don't focus right where your feet are. And you just keep your eyes focused on that. And that's kind of what guides you down the rail. If you're looking around or looking at your feet, that's when you lose balance. So in sitting there, I was actually able to look forward. I'd pinpoint one item, and that's what I would focus on. And that reminded me of rollerblading. So it actually brought a little joy to what I was doing, because I could actually, for the first time, compare this to something from before my accident. And so therapy got better. I started getting stronger, started being able to sit up on my own, eventually got out of the power wheelchair that I was in and was pushing a manual wheelchair, which was extremely hard in the beginning. But life was slowly getting better. And it got to the point where I was getting ready to get discharged from the hospital. And this is about a week or 2 before. And every day in therapy, we'd have 1 hour dedicated to just learning about what life's going to be like with a spinal cord injury. And at this point, it hadn't really sunk into me that this is what my life is going to be like. At this point, I knew for a fact I was going to walk again. No questions asked. My legs are going to start working again, and I'm going to walk away from this wheelchair. And eventually I'll be back in Montana doing everything I was doing before my accident.